Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm pleased to introduce Matt Casey, the Associate Director at the Graduate Career Services Center at Tufts. And today's professional development workshop will be on negotiating salary and benefits. I will defer to Matt, but if you have any questions along the way, I think you can raise your hand or add something to the chat, and I'll help manage the chat room, Matt. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, I'm Matt Casey. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Career Services here at Tufts, and welcome to our conversation about salary and benefit negotiation. You know, for all the things that we talk about from career planning, you know, this one seems that a topic that always feels a little nebulous and feels, you know, what we were trying to do is give us some context and some frameworks around what we're doing and what we're thinking about, and best practices to prepare for the event of getting a job offer or an internship offer or a fellowship offer, and then how to effectively negotiate through that to maximize maximize what you're looking for, and make the organization that you're trying to connect with happy. So as I lead with every presentation here at Tufts, this is one of the most important slides that I prepare. And it's just a reminder is that career planning is a process, with the idea that with all of this information, you know, and about ourselves, I think a lot of us are trying to figure out how do we manage our career plan and our process. And, you know, I think working with career services oftentimes involves, you know, a resume or a CV or a cover letter or some interview prep. You know, we want to make sure that wherever you fall on this continuum, we're here to meet you. So if you're in a position where you don't know what you're looking for or what you want to do, you know, we can worry, but, you know, we can concentrate on, you know, personal discovery or career exploration. Let's say you know what you want to do. How do you develop a targeted strategy that's personalized to you? You know, we certainly interview preparation and developing skills and competencies in that way. And finally, negotiation. And what I'll mention here is negotiation, like many of the things on the sheet, this framework. Negotiation is a skill that can be learned and should be practiced. So when we're talking about today, we're going to be talking about best practices and how to think about preparation, and certainly some scenarios to consider when an offer's been made. Negotiations are transactions. Negotiations are definitely not personal. And negotiations, unless explicitly said otherwise or communicated otherwise, negotiations are expected. You're expected to ask for whatever. There's an understanding. So even if the opportunity that you seek checks all of the boxes, still the opportunity to ask for things that you want, I think shows a measure of diligence and investment in yourself. And I think that's a quality that a lot of organizations are looking for. But the idea is that in order to effectively negotiate, and recognize, I think negotiations are a conversation, and they're not unilateral. But I mean, it's not just the company that's negotiating. The idea is it's two parties, you know, an organization and or a hiring manager and the person's, you know, yourself seeking the job or the internship or the fellowship. The organization has value and has a need that they're trying to fit. They're looking for somebody who can solve the problems that they're trying to understand, or, you know, provide efforts to make their jobs easier. So the idea is that each party is needing something, and each party are wanting things. What we're trying to do is how do we maximize the opportunity for yourself with ideally giving up the least. And I think the organization that you're applying for often feels the same way. So, you know, presenting your goals and your rationales and your alternatives, the things that matter to you, is critical. But the idea is that This is about value contribution, because when you're negotiating, it's, what we're offering this portfolio of salary and benefits and additional options. Why, why should we give you this, and why might we want to give you more or give you something different? And certainly knowing your deal breakers. So things in a negotiation when you might not accept the offer, and we'll go through some details of what those things might look like. But before anything happens, and for those of you who have had presentations of mine before, this slide comes up pretty often, is a personal inventory. It is before you even get to negotiation, the one thing you need more than anything else is information. Now, yes, information about the organization and their role are critical, and we'll mention that briefly. But I want to allude to this framework as a way of thinking about yourself. And the idea is that these are elements that are fundamentally related to you about your career, and certainly personal too. But the reason it becomes helpful is you can map each of these 6 categories to a job opportunity. So understanding yourself specifically, maybe quantitatively and qualitatively, becomes very important, because when you're trying to source why are you valuable, why are you interesting, and why should somebody invest in you, it's not just the skills necessarily that they're investing in. So, I think understanding your interests and your passions. So really, specifically the role you're looking for. Why do you like this role? What is it interesting? Is it the role itself? Is it the nature? Is it the work that they do, the team that they're involved with, the solutions they provide, the audiences they take care of? I think those things are critical. Is why is this, why this job, and why you're connected to it. It doesn't mean that it has to be a perfect fit, or what that organization is perfect for you. It's just recognizing how you feel about that opportunity. The second thing is inventorying your skills, and I would do it in competencies. So the competencies are things you can do, like market research or data analysis or bench science. I think of skills as the tools you use to accomplish the competency. So for instance, market research could be a competency, skill could be Microsoft Excel. So the idea is you're thinking about your skills as a person and why you're valuable as a professional, then specifically how your skills and competencies bring to bear on a role like this. But the next 4 pieces become very interesting. So attributes and descriptions. So how would you describe yourself? How would others describe you? Or how would you ideally like to be described? So this is about fit. If they're making an offer, why should we hire you? Is that you're connected, you're a team player, you're competitive, you're insightful, you're collaborative. Those are examples of qualities that an organization might be looking for, and themes you can bring to bear in your negotiation. Then it's values and motivators, just making sure that things are important to you. So, if you're negotiating on a job, it's thinking about what that organization does and who it does it for and how meaningful it is to you. And are they doing the things, morally or ethically that work well for you? Just keeping track of that can be very helpful as you're thinking about what your needs might be. This may impact the decision making earlier in the process. I think if you're getting an offer, it is likely, let's say, your values and motivators align with the organization's, but not always. Styles and preferences. How do you like to work? How do you like to work with others? How do you like others to work with you? How do you like to be managed? How do you like to lead? That's critical because it's the nature of the work that you want to do. So when you're negotiating on specific points, you've done the research ahead of time on yourself about, the environment in which you want to work, the layout, the structure, the location, the people, the management style that you have, or the bosses you want to engage with, or the organizations you want to connect with within the company organization you're trying to work with. So this is thinking about what your preferences about the nature of the work that you're doing. And the last thing is goals and expectations. And this is about you. It's like, why are you doing this work? Why is this important to you? And what are you trying to get out of it? Is if you have goals like, I want to start a family, or I want to buy a house, or I want to retire early, thinking about salary negotiations or benefits or flexible time off, but realize that like having some intentions about, what you're looking for and why you're valuable can give you a more clearer framework to draw information from to start the negotiation. So this is a sort of an extended way of talking about the fact is self-awareness in detail makes the negotiation process work better. Now, the next thing is really thinking about the job opportunity. So you've done personal inventory, or you know that information. So when you have a position description, and you may have more information now that you've interviewed and getting it, expecting an offer, the idea is to be able to look at that job opportunity or that internship opportunity and understand what they're asking for. So this just happens to be a position that existed, several months ago. It is a real job for an organization, an tech organization in Boston. But there's a lot of detail in here, but it's not segmented out categorically. So what we can do is say, all right, how do I break this job down? So how do I look at this job piece by piece? So thinking about, each of the categories in the left-hand column are taken directly from the previous page. So under responsibilities and job duties on the left-hand column, the first thing is lead our cross-functional DEI working group, etc. So the idea is that one, thinking very specifically about why your skills fit that role. And you may have communicated these things in an interview, and that's great. Or there are things you may think about after the fact. But also why we're doing this is if you're negotiating on the value that you create, being specific on that value is critical when you might be speaking to the amount of work or the time you've spent doing it. The other thing is measuring how interesting is that responsibility to you. Because it's one thing to say I can do the job, it's other things that I'm interested in it, and communicating that in your negotiations with an audience. So this is just saying, how do I, very specific clarity about why you're compatible from a skill perspective and why you're compatible from an interest perspective. And you can do the same thing for qualifications, which are also in that previous slide. So how do you fit the skills or the expectations of this role? But what this culminates in is this is a career path evaluation matrix. And for those of you who've taken job search strategy or internship strategy, the presentation historically, or watched it, you may have seen this slide before. But it's not just useful for selecting the opportunity. It's very good at helping you remember how to evaluate the opportunity you're looking for. So let's say you are looking at this particular opportunity. This is it's called a balanced scorecard, which allows you to quantify, put a number based on how well you think you fit in each of these categories. This is important because when you're thinking about negotiation, it's going to remind you about the specifics of what you're looking for. So from a role alignment, from a skills, making sure you're quantifying, how well you match or where the gaps are and where you want to develop them, your interests, your values, and your motivators. So these are actually, specific elements, goals and expectations. So what you're doing is saying, I know me, I know this job, I know specifically why this matters. And it's not that you don't know this intuitively. What I'm saying is actually having the information accessible and practicing what those lists are makes it easier to negotiate on paper. It also makes it easier to negotiate if you're doing it verbally. And the last category is a slight addendum where it's lifestyle and logistics alignment. And all that means is, how well this job pay, the salary, the benefits, and let's say the location. So this is a scoring mechanism. It doesn't mean you have to reevaluate the job or should I have this job? They're offering you this job. It's just a reminder to go back and say, oh yeah, these things are very important to me. If it, goals and expectations, I want to make this much money, or I think I'm this valuable, I'm going to have to give them a reason why I'm asking for the things that I'm asking for. This is not a directive. It's just a framework and a way of thinking. But doing your work on yourself first sets the baseline for what comes next, is getting into negotiation. So you have received an offer. So ideally, that offer, in fact, I think it almost essential, is that if you've received a job offer from an organization, that initial job offer should be in writing before negotiations start. Otherwise, it's just two people talking about an idea. So there's a formality in having a job, and most organizations will send you a formal job offer letter, and either send, you mail it to you or email it to you, which will have details. Some are very elaborate. Some will talk about all the benefits or give you access to what the benefit structures look like. Benefit guides, they have the salary, the breakdowns. Some of them will have bonus structures. Some will, if there's other compensation elements to this job, like salary is not the only way you get paid within an organization. Depending on what that organization does, it could be salary, it could be bonus, it could be it could be stock options, it could be employee stock purchase plans. It could be travel allowances, etc. So there actually is actual cash compensation that comes in different forms, but making sure that you have that. And so having it in writing first. The second thing is a negotiation isn't a negotiation, an effective one, if only one party has the necessary information. So the idea is that the organization you're working for knows how much money they're willing to, or what their package would look like, or at least from a parameter standpoint. And human resource departments or recruiters or hiring managers usually have elasticity in what they're able to offer and what they're able to negotiate on. But the offer letter is a starting point, oftentimes. When it comes to salary, understanding what the offer is before you start negotiating becomes very, very helpful, and we'll allude to that in a little bit. But if they know how much they have to spend or what they want to invest, understanding what their starting point is, then it's a part of negotiation, so we can talk about value as opposed to prior compensation history. So you can have negotiations in person, which is a little bit harder these days, but at some point it will return to that. You can do it over the phone, so you can have a verbal conversation, but getting those confirmations in writing, and you can do it by email. All of them work. All of them can be effectively. A lot of times it is personal preference. So again, why do we care about negotiation? Is that short-term discomfort for long-term gain? Because negotiation requires you to own your value and why you think your value and how you back that statement up with why you think you're valuable and relevant for a role. So it's really hard to get a significant pay raise once you've started in a role. It does happen through hard work, but what you're trying to do is ideally maximize the salary, the initial salary you get from the organization, because the cascading effect of promotions over time has a pretty significant change given how you negotiate. And because oftentimes many pay increases that you get are a percentage of what you already make, the more you start with, a percentage of more is more. So I think this is a really interesting piece is, a study quizzed graduate master's degree students who had received job offers about whether they had simply accepted the offered starting salary or had tried to negotiate for more. 4 times as many men, 51% of the men versus 12% of the women, said they had pushed for a better deal. And not surprisingly, those who negotiated tend to be rewarded. They got 7% more on average compared with those who did not negotiate. So 2 things are happening in this conversation. One is saying you get, there's some quantitative and qualitative data saying negotiations net you potentially a better, more robust offer. The other thing it speaks to are gender disparities in negotiation. And this is going to the fact as negotiation is an expectation, and everybody gets to do it and everybody should do it. So recognizing that value and preparing for that ask, whoever you are, the actions are the same. We want to be able to do is be able to reaffirm value, reaffirm why you're interested, why making sure why you're the ideal candidate because they're believing in you. So we want to make sure, and this is where preparation and that we can provide in negotiation, evaluating from a career services department to help you think about these starting points so you are empowered to make those decisions. And with practice comes comfort. So we can certainly role play a negotiation, should that be of interesting to you. So if you're doing it, let's say for the first time here in the US, that it's not an unfamiliar thing. So some strong elements to consider in why we do this. So let's get very practical. So let's take a scenario. So you are a graduating student. In this case, it's a physician assistant, but it could be anybody. Gets an offer of $85,000 for their first job in cardiac medicine. This person's so happy they got the job offer that they accept the offer without negotiating. Scenario 2. A new PA, Linda, gets the exact same offer, same credentials, same person, same responsibilities at the same institution. But in scenario 1, Joan elects not to negotiate and accepts the offer initially. Linda decides to negotiate. And after that process, she negotiates $4,000 more in a starting salary. That might not seem, may or may not seem like a significant difference. But if you looked at this over a period of time and you compared starting salaries with annual raises, so for every year that you worked with this organization, they gave you a 5% raise based on that year's salary. If you do this over a 5-year period, what you'll notice is that 2 people doing exactly the same work for the same place, one of them is going to make $23,000 more over 4 years. So understanding your value and asking for it oftentimes, and very often, yields results. So just keeping in mind is that this is 4,000, but you start thinking in large numbers, that option gets larger. And this is based on some metrics. Is the expectation that salary raises every year are 5%? No, not necessarily. It depends on every organization what their style is. 5 in some industries is very, very low, and in some it's incredibly high. So, and depends on market conditions, but helpful to understand. So this is where it gets really practical, and we're just talking about salary. So think about salary is the money that pays all your bills, and so you need to be able, again, I think having a baseline of money to cover your existing expenses. And whatever's left over after your expenses is free cash flow, free money, or savings, however you want to use that. But having a baseline of what you need to be making, and this can be done certainly prior to any negotiations, is understanding your financial situation and your expectations and how they relate to the role that you're pursuing. So start by making a list. And there are a number of online tools and static tools where you can go through exercises and go through all of your expenses. Mint.com is one that does a good job, but there are plenty of tools to do this. But really being thorough and honest about what you think is you are going to be accountable for on a weekly or monthly or annual basis. And then, this is where your goals and expectations come in, is that, well, I want to make this much money, I have to make this much money in the left column. This is to meet my existing needs, or, in my current situation. So the other thing is I need to make more money if I want something more, or I have to take things out or augment my lifestyle to match the income. On the right side, though, is you're looking at, the things you want to do. This is sort of discretionary income or goals, like how many vacations do you want to take? Or, again, did you want to buy a house? Or, how much of your discretionary income goes to food or goes to whatever your hobbies might be. So it's not just taking the baseline. It's like, how does it all fit in? So this is where the intention becomes helpful, because what you're doing is being disappointed with a job offer because the lifestyle that you want doesn't meet what they're looking for, when the reality is the role itself within a certain range only compensates to a certain number. So this is sort of preparing ahead of time and having measured expectations and knowing what you need and what you'd like. So from a salary perspective, it's critical. So in Massachusetts, it's certainly state law. I believe, I don't know if it's federal. I'll get back to you on all of that. But it is illegal as of 2 years ago to ask a candidate of a job for their prior salary history. So before this law was in place, the organization could ask you or strongly request that you tell them what you've made in previous opportunities if you've worked somewhere else. So that is a big deal, because let's say your last position you made, and let's take this graphic on this slide, is that in your last position, and we'll reverse this, is that you made $65,000 in your last job, and you've gone to graduate school, you've done all this work, the volunteer pieces, you've added to your skill set, and given the research you've done, you think you're worth $100,000. But if the organization may be valuing that job at $100,000, but if you tell them your last job you made $65,000, they might say, okay, if we give them a 5% or a 10% increase over their previous salary, they'll take $75,000 and we save ourselves $25,000 in salary and benefits. That's why it's illegal. What it makes sure is job and internship negotiations are based on value and not on history. So, but that being said, organizations can say, well, what are your salary expectations? Having a range, I think, is essential. And I will caveat that it's not easy. There is no, well, that's not true. There are sources that are being developed that are much more robust when it comes to real-time detailed salary data across industries and disciplines and jobs. But right now, I think a lot of times you're using multiple sources to get a range of what you think that opportunity looks like. So doing research on the market, what's out there is critical. So you're thinking about, not only about, what that job's value, but that same job in Boston may be valued specifically less or pay less, but because the quality the cost of living in a new geography is significantly lower, is that you may end up, making the same amount, or actually making, tend to make more in net. So, there's multiple resources. PayScale is one of them. Salary.com is another. LinkedIn Premium is a very good tool. So if you're looking at options, and should you have LinkedIn Premium, and for anybody that has never used it, if you sign up for it, you get your first month free. So what you can do is you can look up similar roles, that historical roles or current roles, and look at what those salary expectations. So it provides salary data on similar positions, so you can have an idea of what that pay might look like in a similar geography. So if you're looking at something like pay scale, this isn't a specific example, is that if you were bringing based on a variety of metrics. So if you were trying to compare a job in Boston to a job in Indianapolis, Indiana, and in Boston, the job you're applying for is going to give you an annual salary of $50,000. A comparative salary in Indianapolis is $31,000. The reason for that is they're looking at the cost of living. So the cost of things in your life. Housing is often a big one. Utilities, so the things you're going to be paying, the gas and electric and cable, etc. Groceries, so how much it costs to buy a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread, or etc. And then transportation, how expensive is to get somewhere? Are those things subsidized? Is it access? So taking in all of these factors behind the scenes, it's coming up with an analysis. This can be helpful. So if this is an example where you may be asking for a salary for a market, but that's not what they're going to offer because it's not relative. It's the salaries relative to the geography. That doesn't mean that in places the salary stays the same. Is that you make it pay the same in Boston as you do in Indianapolis, but it's just recognizing that flexibility. So you've done your work, you've done your analysis, you have looked at the information and your requirements for you. When should you start the negotiations? As I mentioned, it's after you've received the job offer. And to the point is that after you receive the job offer, you have leverage. You have the ability to negotiate. If you're negotiating before that, nobody is beholden to any statements that are made. Even if you may have been promised something 2 weeks before in an interview, but if you don't get that in writing at the end, it's not real. I think I mentioned before, like certainly not giving out the first salary numbers and giving a range. And I think that range is often sometimes, a $10,000 range. I would say that's a benchmark or a baseline. It doesn't have there could be significantly larger ranges than that. And again, with negotiations, a skill, career services, I can certainly work with you to do some of the market research and think about what those ranges might look like and if there are specific resources. For instance, if you are a professional, a lot of professional associations, like if you went to the American Psychiatry Association and went to their site, they oftentimes have job and career pages. A lot of times they have a lot of information about job markets, and a lot of them have salary guides. And sometimes you have to be a member, sometimes you don't. So there are tools, accessing resources at the library to give you these numbers that seem elusive. This is a slide that I love because it really brings to bear the variety of things you can negotiate on as a compensation package, which is not just salary. Again, salary is the money that's paid and say deposited into your account, every pay period. But the compensation package, again, is all of the things that the organization is offering, because those things come, everything that's being offered by an organization to a certain degree can be monetized, has value to it. So, it could be salary, it could be. But then you think about, can I negotiate on the paid time off? So how much time off I have in an organization? So my holidays and my sick time. Can I negotiate my work week? So, how long can that be? Is it a 40-hour week? Is it 35? Can I customize my hours? Do I have to work a 9 to 5? Can I piece this together? Maybe you have a family, they don't necessarily have to know those things, but negotiating, your start time, or needing a break every 2 days, or, to pick up your kids or whatever, but those things are real. So part-time jobs, job sharing, 401k and 403b. For those of you who are unfamiliar, these are employer-sponsored retirement plans. So what they typically mean is that your employer makes a contribution to your retirement on your behalf. So you could have an organization that says, we will contribute 10% of your salary every year to this retirement account, and you can put it in the stock market or in a variety of funds that you want to. A 401k is for for-profit companies, and a 403b is for nonprofits, but essentially they're the same. But that's a huge, so can you negotiate on the percentage that comes in, or what the vesting schedule? So a vesting schedule is sometimes when you start your job, any money that's put into your account is yours. So should you leave the organization, however you've accumulated, if you're there for 3 months, your 3 months of retirement savings that they've contributed goes with you. There are other organizations where they have vesting schedules where you might get 20% the first year and 20% the next year. So they're still adding the information or adding the money, but you might not get 100% of whatever they contributed until year 5. So, and sometimes they vesting schedules like and Tufts is one. Tufts has a 3-year vesting schedule, is that they make contributions on your behalf, but they have a 3-year schedule, is that after 3 years, the money that they've contributed is yours. But before that, you forfeit it. I will say that negotiating more specific financial benefits like this are very, very difficult. A lot of times these are just organization-wide protocols or boundaries, but they might allude to that there's some flexibility. Relocation. So will they pay for you to move if you have to make a change? That happens all the time, and a lot of times people don't think about that. Like, do you pay is there a relocation package? Sometimes there is. Sometimes there's not, but sometimes they'll offer a one-time signing bonus. That's let's say they offer you $10,000, and it's taxed, but it's $10,000 to do whatever you want to prepare you for this position. Stock options. So for public companies that issue stock, a lot of times they have stock plans that you can invest in, or they invest in your behalf, or they just give it to you on either randomly or on quarterly or annual milestones. So again, and there are for depending on your level in an organization, your stock options and bonus, and I didn't mention bonus is, on top of your salary. Will, if you hit certain performance metrics, you do your job really well and you meet certain criteria, we'll give you 10% of your salary. So you might negotiate, if they offer bonuses, you might negotiate a bonus percentage, or maybe you negotiate, they have an annual bonus structure. Would they consider a semi-annual bonus structure? So you can negotiate. It's not only negotiate on timing. You can negotiate on the number of stock options, so that the number of options you can buy. We're not going to go into detail of all the pieces of how companies can pay you in different mediums other than straight cash, but there's flexibility. Sign-on bonuses, your job title, just because it's set up in the position description doesn't mean that can't change. Performance bonuses, stock purchase plans, insurance. Again, these are oftentimes more difficult, very difficult to negotiate on, because usually these are rates that the organizations will negotiate with a health insurance company or a dental plan or disability or another insurance firm, where they're spreading that burden across the entire organization, the people that do that. So everybody, if whatever plan you're in, you're paying for that amount. Healthcare and reimbursement accounts, again, so flexible spending accounts. We don't have to go into that, but there's a flexibility. CMEs, and this can be true for a lot of people, is that these are For any of you who have specialties that require certifications or credentials that have to be updated annually, but it could be, maybe you have to take a course to get these credits, or maybe professional development. So just because, maybe there's requirements of your profession that oftentimes require out-of-pocket expenses on on your time and your dollars to do, asking for them to pay for those things because it's completely relevant to the job. Then training and professional development, like, if you want to get better at Excel and they don't have a program, can they teach you how to do that? Or leadership training or management training, or tools and resources to make your job better. And I think travel perks and requirements too. So it's expense accounts. So, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I think it's important to go through all of these elements because there's a ton of things that aren't just dollars. And I think that's really, or speaking specifically of the US, but I think this is true internationally. But this, this conversation is speaking to sort of a US negotiation strategy. Globally, it varies by institution, it varies by geography and expectations. So this particular conversation is certainly speaking to the US market. So let's talk about scenarios that can be important. So you are offered $85,000 for a job. So you looked at it, you're offered it, you think it's fair, you feel it's a little low based on what other institutions are offering. So you are saying, you've done your research, your diligence, you think that $90,000 is a reasonable starting salary that would make you happy. Maybe you've come to that conclusion yourself. Maybe you've talked with some other people. Maybe you work with career services, but you're like, that makes sense, like based on what I know. Since you're happy with the other benefits, so it's just salary that you're interested in negotiating on, you're not going to ask for anything more than just a salary increase. But if there are aspects of the benefit package you're just, you're not excited about or want to negotiate, when you negotiate, you want to make sure you've thought about these things ahead of time, which is why you never accept an offer ever on the same day. If an organization say we need an answer by the end of the day, strongly recommend at least talking to somebody, because these are major life decisions. These are our careers. These are our jobs. And to understand what we need and what we want and have the time to process that, and everybody's different, is critical. So just be mindful if that is the request, asking for the time, and they should be able to accommodate that. But whenever you're negotiating after you've received an offer, you're laying out all the parameters of what you want to negotiate for, either in a conversation or in email, on the phone or in person or in email. But whatever it is, it's making sure whatever you negotiate and they agree to, is you're getting that agreement in writing every time, because the negotiation might happen over 2 or 3 or 4 emails. That's not uncommon, but it's making sure that the documentation is clear each time. So how do you ask for that? So I think this is a really good professional example of how to ask for a higher salary. So, thank you again for giving me the time to offer, to consider your offer. I'm very excited by the prospect of being a PA at Homeland Hospital. Given these many responsibilities of the job and the prior experience in orthopedics that I bring to it, I'm wondering if you might be able to get the salary closer to $95,000. Or you could give it a range, a salary range closer to $90,000 to $100,000. There's no, especially if you're talking in person, right after you ask for that, don't say anything else. Wait for the person to respond. One of the tendencies when we're asking for something is to have this reaction, is that, well, I asked for this thing, I'm really uncomfortable. Maybe I'll come back, or I'll reduce it a little bit, or maybe I'll ask for a little bit less. What you're looking for is their reaction to you. This is not personal. It's not personal from the hiring manager or human resources or the boss, is that they're trying to get somebody in the door. They know they've got to pay to do that. So you're telling them what you think you're worth, and they get to decide if they're willing to compensate you for that. So, oftentimes the organization, they won't almost never give you a response verbally or like immediately. Usually there's an intermediary with a large organization that, like, let's say human resources or internal recruiter, that is working for the hiring manager. So maybe, like, let's say your boss or your boss's boss who's budgeting for this job. They're working with this recruiting professional internally, and you're working with them. So they're bridging the gap. So they're the go-between, the filter. So again, staying silent after the ask I think is critical. Is let them respond. So what do you do given the conditions of varied responses? So the option one is they give you what you want. So they say, we've looked at internally and we can offer you $90,000. Once you extend an option and they say, and you like what they've offered, I'd be happy to accept the job. I'm very excited about it. Can you please send me the offer in writing? So if they meet your ask, the things you're asking for, don't ask for more. So they're like, oh, if they're going to offer me 90, maybe they'll offer me 95. Once you've given the range and they've made that offer, you can accept it if that's what you're looking for. But always ask for the offer in writing. That being said, they may say, you may say, I want that, but maybe you say, and this is critical. This is why doing your budgeting first and assessing your needs and goals is important, is needing to know your absolute lowest salary before you talk about any of this. The idea is that 90,000 would make you the happiest, but you could live with 85,000. So the idea is that, it's needs versus wants. And it doesn't, there are always other conditions. Like if you have a side job or side hustle, like there's a lot, it's not necessarily one lever. This is just giving you an example. Like this happens to be a situation where you're like one job, one person, I have this lifestyle, I have these expenses, this is what I need to have coming in the door. And this is why I'm going for this job and what I think I'm worth. So the employer says, we've had the chance to discuss this internally and look at our budget, and we're just not able to go to 90K. We can offer you, 88.5. So you can say, like, okay, in that case, I'd be happy to accept the offer. Thank you very much. So you've asked for 90,000, which is your worth. They've said, we can't meet that expectation. Would you be willing to consider 88.5? If you like that, okay, I'm happy to accept the offer. Thank you very much. I'm excited about the job. Can you please send me the offer in writing? So again, thank you very much for the offer. I'm still very excited about the position, but I'm wondering if it might be possible for us to agree to that salary, but to include in the offer a salary review after 6 months or more vacation. So this is salary, but you're adding in context about other things you might want to negotiate on from a compensation standpoint. I guess vacation time as well, but I think laying it out initially can be very helpful, if discuss what you would be asking for. But in this particular case, you certainly can ask, can I have a salary review after 6 months? So they said, we're going to offer you 88.5, but you're asking for, if I perform and excel in my role, can we get documented that in 6 months we can have a conversation, a review of my salary and my benefits, and that you may consider increasing that. So you take the existing offer, but it's be able to return to it as an employee. So, the employer says, I've checked in my end. We can indeed offer you, 88.5 with salary review after 6 months, or 5 extra vacation days, or a 5K signing bonus. So again, they've said, we can offer you this scenario where we can give you the 88,000, Or we can, it could be and, or it could be or we'll give you 5 extra vacation days or signing bonus. So they may be giving you some options to consider. So when you've thought about all the things you need, you're like, all right, what are you're thinking about multiple trade-offs. Again, thank you. That's great. In this case, I'd love to accept the offer. Again, have it in writing. So, I think thinking about, a non-salary ask, like, so what can you ask for beyond that sort of salary and benefits? Yes, you can ask for, a higher base salary, to get stock options and scheduling and telecommuting and reimbursement, vacation days and perks. So a lot of places will pay for commuting or parking or subsidize it. So they won't pay for all of it, but they'll pay for part of it. There are organizations, depending if you use it a lot, pay for your computer, pay for your cell phone, pay for your internet, depending on what you're doing there. In this current, pandemic, is that there are a lot of organizations where, people who don't have the space to work are negotiating with companies to build add-ons to their homes or offices or have a small working room or shed added to their place. So it doesn't just have to be, it's not always necessarily feel like a small ask. You're like, in order to perform in the best way possible in this job, and I don't have the specific freedom and space in my own home, for instance, or would you pay for the ability to work at a co-working space if you're doing something remotely? And benefits and training, and again, membership dues. So lots of pieces and elements to be able to consider when you're negotiating. And there could be a situation where the employer says, we've asked the hiring manager, and unfortunately we can't go any higher than our initial offer. This is where we stand for this position. And okay, I understand. Thank you for trying. In that case, can I have a little bit more time to think it over? You do not have to accept on the spot. Like you've asked for something that you wanted. You don't necessarily have to respond immediately to say that, that you just, okay, that's fine. You're like, you want to think about it for a little bit. So in those particular situations, it's asking yourself questions. How badly do you want this job? How badly do you need that salary? And then thinking about sort of the possibilities, like, how badly do you need the salary? What's the potential for growth? What other benefits? Can you negotiate other things? But at the end of the day, you are the deciding factor about whether or not you take that opportunity. But with good information, makes that easier.
Matt, there's a question in the chat. What's an appropriate amount of additional time to ask for?
That's a great question. So it's funny, I was talking to a colleague of mine recently that said they oftentimes give offers on Fridays, so people have the weekend to think about it, and they like to have responses on Monday. The idea is that appropriate is situational. And the idea is, it's thank you for the offer. I'd like to discuss this with my family. And then you can set an expectation. Again, even the offer, even that time to evaluate can be negotiated. So let's say you have a situation where you need more time than a weekend. Maybe you want a week. Maybe you have another offer that you're considering. I think within a week's time frame is reasonable, probably within a work week. So if you get an offer on a Monday, may I have till Friday to do this? Or if you get an offer on let's say a Friday, you don't have to have an answer at Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Like you're like, I'd like the weekend, but I don't. The first time I'll have to be able to discuss this will be early next week. May I get back to you on Wednesday? Most places, if they're making the offer and want you in that role, they'll wait for the response, unless they're something very, very specific. But if you have a condition under those situations, that's what we could talk to a coach, talk to us, talk to somebody who can navigate those things. So, I no less than 24 hours, I would say, to think about it. I think it's appropriate. These are big decisions. And I think the expectations that you're mindful of your, because you're not just thinking about the salary, you're thinking about the whole job, what this might do to you, this might do to your family, might do to your situation, might do to your income, might do to everything. It's so those can be, those can be very meaningful and intense evaluations. So, I'd say 3 to 5 days is probably fine, and there are probably conditions you ask for more. But that's a great question. Thanks for asking. So this one slide I'll just mention is that let's say you have 2 job offers. For example, let's say you've in the same week you've been offered 2 different roles. How do you compare those roles and make decisions? This is just a framework. There are many more that you can use, but the idea is that you can look at what the opportunity is offering and match it up, so you can look at the whole package, the whole compensation package that they're offering, and does it work for you? Like, it may matter, like this, job 2 may offer $12,000 less, but the retirement invests immediately. So it won't take you 5 years to have that extra money, and that grows fast. Or, offer 2 offers, 4 times more vacation time and more flexibility and a work from home arrangement. And well, now that my benefits are covered, I can take less salary. Or so it's just recognizing the fact that, and having a framework to evaluate A, what's important to you, what you've done, and B, what are the actual elements that you're trying to evaluate, and then looking at it as a whole thing. And then at the end of the day, you decide like what works best for you, So recognizing, should you get a job offer or multiple offers, you could certainly ask us Career Services, and we can certainly walk you through a process to, analyzing, do you think this offer's fair? What are the things I might want to negotiate on? Can I practice these things? We can definitely do that. So the take home is research. Research yourself, research the specific opportunity, research the company, research your peers. So you have all the information at your disposal to be a strong negotiator. Practice, practice, and practice. Is that, with practice and saying out loud or writing it down, I think brings confidence. And I think polish to delivery, and that can be beneficial when you're having a conversation in writing or verbally to an organization. Know your limits on the high side or the low side, what's not going to work for you. Definitely knowing what your must-haves or deal breakers are. Like if they're going to offer 55 and you need 75 and 50, and you can't take, then that might be a deal breaker. And knowing that you may not get everything you want, it's not personal, but the reality is that, again, the negotiation, the whole idea is that, each party in a negotiation wants to maximize what they get and ideally give up the least. So it's what you're trying to find is an equilibrium. And, they're informed, they have information, but recognizing is that organizations are oftentimes very reasonable. And oftentimes it's not the first person that they've hired. It's not the first time they've received these questions. They're not, not necessarily going to be a lot of surprises. So knowing that they're trained to do this and that it's on personal, I think hopefully will give you, for those of you who might be nervous about something like this, some comfort is that it's reasonable and expected. Here's just another example of a process of salary negotiation that we'll certainly share the slide deck if you want to review at some point. But I'm grateful for the time today. We are, Tufts Career Center is doing all programming this year virtually. So all career fairs, all events, all workshops. So, but we still have an office in Delling. I don't know when it's going to be open, and if it does, we'll be deciding whether or not we're going to be seeing people in person. But we are at 740 Dowling Hall. We just relaunched our Career Center webpage. I think it's great information, good visually. Things are easier to access. So definitely check us out at careers.tufts.edu. And should you want to reach out to me personally, certainly connect with me at matthew.casey@tufts.edu. And should you want to set up a conversation on Handshake, which is the best way to set up an appointment, you can find me there. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And I am happy to take any and all questions that you might have.
Thanks, Matt. I know we're at time, but a question in the chat is, not sure if you mentioned this or not, but do negotiations apply to contractor roles?
Yeah, they can. They can. I mean, there are times when organizations say, this contracting role is $80 to $100 an hour, no salary or no benefits. It's just that's something you manage, in a lot of cases. But you may be working with, either with a organization, a company, and you believe your rate should be, 110 or 120 or so. Yes, I think there are possibilities like, would you, given my experience, would you consider this? Because, another $10 an hour over 100 hours adds up.
Thank you. Of
course.
Also, there's a question, is it a good idea to cite some of the personal reasons behind the negotiation?
I'd say generally the answer is no. I think, it is transactional, like, working for a great organization that believes in you and here's your values. But at the end of the day, it's asking you to do a job, and we're negotiating on how we can create an environment that's most conducive to you to do that job. But the context in which you're asking for it is oftentimes not relevant to the conversation. There are situations where there are caveats where that may not be the case, but oftentimes, like let's say, you are caring for an aging parent. Let's say it's, and it requires a certain amount of time. Like, does the organization need to know about your personal situation? I would say no. No, it's something, interviews can be different. If you're interviewing with somebody, you feel comfortable, personally, like, if sometimes those conversations can be open about those pieces, but I would say in a negotiation is most likely no. Talk about why it's about value, contribution, and why they should compensate you fairly for the value that you create.
We got several thank yous in the chat, Matt. So I think we're at time. So again, and I need to jump off, but we'll share this recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll also share all the slides to anyone who needs them. So thanks again, Matt.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.